Hi, everyone. Welcome to another one of our wonderful YouTube pitch deck reviews. I'm Jay Powell, CEO of the Powell Group and founder of IndieGameBusiness. And with me, I have, as always, Omar, our wonderful design consultant who does also all of our pitch deck reviews that are on the Discord every 2 weeks, as well as our new private personalized pitch deck review systems. You can go to indiegamebusiness.com/pitch deck reviews, and we've got a completely customizable and paid service for that now as well. But anyway, commercial aside, we've got Mandy with Zeitgeist Studios with us today. We're going to be going through her deck on Name of the Will. And so with that, we're going to jump straight into it. Omar, you want to kick off the first page?
Oh, you throw it at me straight away, right? Okay, yeah, cool. Before I even go into the first slide, the title page, I like to do a little overview just to give you a sense of like what we're going to talk about. Just off the top of my head and also from my notes, I think both Jay and I picked up on the fact that there are a lot of slides here. So we may need to go through them, I won't say quickly, but thoroughly and efficiently. The other thing I was going to say is that our viewers, there might be a couple of instances where I'm talking about slides that are in different places. That's because I think the ordering of this deck needs a little bit of work, so I might be doing a bit of back and forth. But besides all the critique, I love the art style. I think some of the slides are really clean, very easy to read. It's really nicely presented. So I think you've got a very strong theme running through and through, which is great to see. But yeah, I'm going to start now talking about the first slide. And you know what? Believe it or not, I don't really have a lot to say about this, like in the sense that I don't have a lot to criticize. I think it's really strong. It's visually quite powerful. Looking at it just at a glance, I would be like, oh, this looks like some kind of narrative experience. It's a bit dystopian. There are some mature themes in here. It could possibly be a war zone in the background. I'm not sure. The hand-drawn art style to me says that this isn't a high-energy kind of like action experience with, stylized visuals like a platform or anything. It looks more like it's going to be possibly like a visual novel / adventure type game. So yeah, I like the art. Very interesting. Don't know what's going on, but you've already got my attention. A couple of things that I would say that I think you could add to this. I mean, Name of the Will is the name of the game. Great. You've got a daunting and healing adventure. I love that as a little tag underneath. This is just like being a bit pedantic. I think just like the logo of your company. I think it'd be nice to put a little disclaimer on the bottom as well that you're sharing with the publisher. Stuff that we picked up on now before I use it. I never used to really say a lot about it, but then Jay was like, no, put that in private and confidential, for a publisher's eyes only. But other than that, I like it. I don't really have a lot to say. Jay?
No, I had the same thing. Make sure that it's noted for that it is confidential. And two, yeah, definitely add your company logo and name. But one thing I want to note at this slide, because I'm going to be talking about it on further slides too, is that you call it a daunting and healing adventure. So just put a pin in that for a little bit, and then I'll circle back on it.
Yeah. Right.
I don't have a ton of comments on this slide, to be blunt, Omar. So you can take it away. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you want to play the trailer first?
Yeah.
We did for like our viewers.
Now I don't know if that audio is going through or not, but we're playing it so you can at least see it.
It is. I like that bit. Pretty nice. Very surreal, very creepy, very intriguing, very mysterious. All those good words. I wrote down. I was like, I like the tagline. I like the description of the top. It's like, welcome to hope. and then it's like where the benevolent father. So you've got that immediate contrast, and then it says leads your joyful cult. You got some oxymorons in there, which is great. It made me think of like a lot of shows and movies that I've like watched. There's a documentary on Netflix called Wild Wild Country, which is amazing. About this kind of like cult in the States, like in the 70s, I think it was. Handmaid's Tale, The Prisoner, this TV show series from the 60s, like UK, 1980 for like Big Brother and Logan's Run. So I'm getting all those vibes from it. Fantastic. Trailer's great, very mysterious. I will say it could show a little bit more in terms of what's happening with regards to gameplay, because you can't make that easy separation between like cutscene and story and actual gameplay. It's a little bit difficult to read. But yeah, the overview is great. Straight to the point. I mean, just off the checklist, you've got story in there, you've got setting, you've got mystery, there's a goal. I'm getting a sense of like the genre, and you mentioned some key features in terms of like mystery puzzle mechanics and time periods. So all great. What I will say though, going forward, this is being nitpicky. On the top right, you have the name of the game on every single slide. I don't think you need that. It's just a lot of repetition. It's quite distracting. I like the clean look that you've got throughout. So I would lose that. The other thing I was going to say, this is a random idea from me, right? On the top left, on all the slides, you have this mask or this chubby face. And when I watched the trailer, I really liked what you did, where the mask reveals the real face. And I was wondering with each slide, if you could do that with that little icon, where with each slide, it starts to peel away. And at the end, you get the reveal right at the end of the deck. And I was like, oh, that would be such a nice touch. Kind of really ties into what you've got in the visual imagery. But other than that, I don't really have a lot to say. This is pretty good.
It's funny because I was going to say make the name in the top right bigger on each slide.
I saw your face, and I was like, I'm saying something that Jay disagrees with. Let's see where this goes.
I mean, I think it's one of those. It's obviously you've got two people that look at a lot of these things, and we have two wildly different opinions on it. I do love the idea of transitioning the face to, like, to the person. All I can think of is Doom Guy at that point in time.
Yeah.
And, but all right, so here's does my mouse come up over here? It does not.
Yeah. No, it doesn't. It just highlights.
So here on this slide, it is Name of the Wheel is now a story-rich daylight horror puzzle game. So this is the pin I was talking about, and I'm going to poke it a couple more times. So here we've got a daunting and healing adventure. Now we've got a story-rich daylight horror puzzle game.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of more instances on deeper in the deck where it's got different names. So these are all cases where you're going to need to standardize it going all the way through. And the trailer is good, but I mean, you don't see a ton of gameplay in there, but I think it does a very good job of getting, across what the point of the game is too. But yeah, that's really all I've got on this one as well.
Yeah, I want to say you guys are very good at setting the mood. The atmosphere is great throughout, like trailer, the art style, the presentation. But I think it's like Jay says, you've got to be very good at like effectively communicating what type of game you're making. And Jay is right. I've got that in my notes as well. A few instances later where it's like, what kind of game is this? But yeah, anyway, I'm gonna talk about this now. This is where I do this. What was that? Sorry, Jay.
I was gonna go.
Is it your turn to go first? All right, sorry.
Well, no, I just like to go first to the ones where I actually have substantial comments, because otherwise, you cover everything. Anyway, so here we go. Now it's a 2D side scroller. So we've got 3 slides. We're 3 slides in. We have 3 different games. So is it really a side scroller? Yes, you walk across the screen side to side, but it's not like a Metroidvania, Castlevania type, side scroller. So keep that in mind. Use that. Find a central point. I would hesitate to use the word puzzle in it. Puzzle is one of those words that can get it like automatically kicked from some publishers because they're not looking for puzzle games and they don't read any further. They just go puzzle. Okay, no. The other one is like a visual novel. I know you all have done visual novels as referenced in the end of it, but I wouldn't refer to the game as that. It's not really one anyway, but that's just the words that I would stay away from. The other one is, even if it's just for the sake of pitching, put your price point at $15. And that's my main two things. I mean, there are possibly issues with the languages when you're doing Switch, because Nintendo has some funky rules about where you can do traditional Chinese versus other versions, but that's like super, super minor. Get your genre nailed down and consistent, and bump it up to $15.
Okay, so I agree with some of the things you've said there already. One thing I was going to say is this particular slide. Now, firstly, I don't think it's a key feature slide. This is a summary or that's what it, because you're not describing the features of your game. You're just calling out the bits of information that are relevant for a publisher to like box it and send it to someone and say, oh, I've got a game here with 4 hours of playtime, it's single player, but these aren't really things you want to shout about. So I think this needs a rename. I think it's a summary. And the other thing I was going to say is, like, Kimberly and I do the Discord reviews, and Jay and I do this as well. I'm always like in a split mind about, should this kind of slide be at the start of a presentation or near the end, where you're just kind of wrapping up? It can go either place. I'm more of a fan of putting these at the end, to be honest, because I like the deck to flow in a particular way. So yeah, if you rename it, it can live here, or it can live closer towards the end. It's kind of up to you how you want to do that. But with that said, there are a couple of things that I picked up on as well that Jade mentioned. So first thing I would say is, I wouldn't lead with hours of playtime. I don't think that's the strongest thing to lead with. Like 4 hours of playtime is good because it says to a publisher, this is a short, snappy, concise experience. But I think the more important things for me are like things you've highlighted here, where you said there's 4 endings, but you kind of downplay it. You just say 3 normal and 1 hidden. Whereas for me, it would be like 3 unique endings and a hidden ending. So then it's kind of like emphasizing the fact that you need to play it again to get a different ending, rather than saying there's just 3 normal, because then that to me says they're all equally the same in terms of like payoff. I agree with the 2D side scroller, because that to me says platformer, which is not fair, but that's what comes to mind. The other thing I was going to say is, I've got this further on in my notes, but I'll say it now in case I forget. So your localization, you're still deciding. So you got English, traditional Chinese. I was wondering why you haven't got simplified Chinese on here. I know you got Cantonese for the Hong Kong market, but you haven't got simplified Chinese. Well, I don't know.
Yeah, we are still deciding that.
Okay. All right. Cool. The other thing I was going to say is, your game is potentially going to appeal to people who like to watch films, read anime, manga, and all that, which have these kind of cultish themes and dystopian themes. Very big in South Korea, very big in Japan. South Korea's cinema has had a huge influence on the Western market. I mean, just like Squid Game, for example. So for me, it's almost like a missed opportunity to not have more Asian languages. So, South Korean, Japanese, I would think about like Indonesia as well. I would think about other languages which would appeal to those territories. Otherwise, it's very specific in terms of who it's targeting. So I think have a look at that. Mm-hmm. The other thing I was also going to say is, you've repeated the platforms again. You already said that before, but I think the previous one didn't say Steam Deck, but now here it says Steam Deck. But then you also say Switch 1 and 2 release optional, which for me as a publisher is confusing, because I'm like, wait, is that going to be part of the proposition, or is that going to be an additional cost? I don't know, and we get to that when we get to the budget slide. So yeah, I think this just needs a bit of tweaking, and then you're kind of in a good place with it. Yeah, cool. All right, you gonna go first again?
I can. You don't need this many meet the characters slides. We've got, let's see, two.
Yeah.
I would simplify it into 1.
Yes.
And truthfully, if you wanted to go even further, you could just talk about Rita. But you don't necessarily need to take up 2 sets of slides with just your characters in the story. Omar?
Yeah, exactly the same. In my notes I had, 2 things. I said, if you've got characters being introduced this early on without telling me about the story first, that's a bit of a concern. I would not prioritize this slide. You could either put this in the appendix or talk about it after you've talked about the story. I agree with Jay. You can put all 4 on one slide. And also the other thing is, I don't know which character is the playable character. Like that's the thing. So it's like I saw a character that I control, but it's like who? Because they all have the same masks, and it's the body type that differentiates them. So I don't know who's who. So yeah, I feel like you could put this in the appendix and maybe just mention the main character by name, and then the others could be dropped in on like little screenshots that you have. That is usually what you see with terms of like art direction, concept art. It's usually put in the appendix. Yeah. And with that said, we could skip the other one. So that's it.
To be fair, though, the face masks that all the characters have do a excellent point of projecting creepy cult. I just want to throw that out there. You've done really well there. All right. Fire away, Omar.
So this, I think you've written gameplay here, but again, I think this isn't gameplay for me. You're starting to talk about story and world building. You had the overview, which introduced the basic premise, and now you're saying it's a descent into a hand-drawn Asian euphoric cult. So you're getting into specifics, right? Okay, so it's set in a Hong Kong-inspired world. What you want to do is start talking about the premise. And what's interesting is I went on your Kickstarter and your Steam page. Your Kickstarter page has some fantastic little snippets explaining how this character wakes up, what kind of world they've arrived in. I feel like you need to put that information on this slide. So call it like a story or world building or whatever, narrative slide. Just have some of that information here. And I think that's what you want to get across. For me, it's like the numbers are good. It's like 60 hand-drawn scenes, cinematic animations, 150 interactable objects. But that's just numbers without real context. Like this is an emotional experience. You've got to pull in the publishers that are really drawn to narrative experiences, and they don't want to really see these numbers. They want to see what the story is, what the world is, why is this unique, why is this different, why have I never played a game like this before. So I think you can repurpose this slide to be like the story one and do a bit more of a deep dive into that. And potentially you can have the main character replace that visual, just like if Rita is the main character, just have her there, mention her by name, and just give her an overview of what the story is. And I think you're good.
I missed one of mine. On the characters, you misspelled there's a typo in there for aggressively on the did you know that already?
What?
Fine.
What? I must have missed this. What are you talking about? Oh,
Big Brother who passive aggressively. Oh. Which could be, I mean, to be fair, I'm no psychologist. That could be a completely different thing where you overly agree with someone, but I think you meant passive aggressive.
I like that. That kind of gives me a sense of what his persona's like. He's this friendly giant, but he's too friendly.
I mean, so I'm along the same lines, and we can cover both of these, I believe.
Yeah.
These aren't really gameplay slides to me. These are I wrote atmosphere. You know, these set the atmosphere and the tone, but they're not really gameplay. And I don't know that you need 2 slides to do it, because I want to say some of these are reused. And here we can see I did found my mouse. Here we can see that, you know, they're obviously kicking this person and abusing this person, but I don't know that you need 2 slides for it. And I would change it to gameplay. I mean, not change it from gameplay to like atmosphere or tone or something along those lines. Did you have anything on this slide in particular, Omar?
I feel like you've somehow hacked my computer and read my notes, because I have the exact same thing written here. I wrote, this is more about mood, atmosphere, and setting. This could be incorporated in the previous slide about story and world building. So totally agree with Jay. You don't need 2 slides. This is still part of that one. And I don't think you need this many visuals. I think what would make more sense now is, like, if you've done story, you want to start moving on to actual gameplay. So yeah, I think do what Jay's just suggested, merge it in. But I had a couple of other points, things that are not in your deck, which I think you do need, is like a slide which is saying, what are the USPs of your game? What are the main features of your game? Because when I went through the whole deck, you have these kind of gameplay moments where you've kind of shown a stealth section and puzzles. And I feel like you almost want, like, USPs of my game are, you know, there are very few games which are themed around cults. right? I think there was a simulator game a couple of years ago. Was it Honey? I joined a cult or something. It's
well, there was one literally called Cult Simulator a few years ago.
Cult Simulator as well, yeah.
But that was like a card game.
Yeah.
I love that game, but I didn't understand it.
There's simulation games, but you could say that there are very few or none in the narrative space. So that it's like you start to flesh out the pillars or the USPs of your game. So I think you need a slide for that. And then you'd want one which is the features of your game. And I pulled out 4. It's like you've got this timeline. We'll get to it, but there's like time manipulation, there's stealth, there's puzzles, mini games, and then there's like choices and decision making. And it's like those are the components that make up this experience in terms of features and gameplay. So yeah, I think just merge it into the other one, and you already lost a few slides just from the feedback you've been given so far, which is good. Trimming the fat. Oh, Jay, I'm just going to say, I don't think you need this.
Okay, yeah, that was exactly my thing. I was like, I don't understand why the slide's in here.
Yeah. I sort of know what's happening. You're trying to. I love the fact that the puzzles are incorporated into like the indoctrination that's happening in the classroom, and it's like, today we will tell you how to be happy or whatever it is. I don't know. And it's like, here's a scenario in this cult. We are like, I don't know, unified. We are one. We help each other, and then you try and solve it. And then if you do the wrong thing, you get that guy appearing out of nowhere, and he could be, I don't know, the teacher. He could be vigilator. I don't know, but yeah, I don't know. I think you need to either you could repurpose this elsewhere if it was like a mini game slide, but I don't think there's enough here to give you a sense of what the actual gameplay is because it's so light touch.
And it could be another GIF that you use somewhere else in the slide when you're talking about something else too, but it does not need to be its own slide.
Yeah. I think if we have time at the end, it would be great to see your Kickstarter page because you have some fantastic GIFs on there, which I think could be put into this deck. But yeah.
So right, my notes on this one simply said, this is the first slide where you actually talk about gameplay. And we are, how many in here at this point? This is slide 9.
Yeah, 20. We did halfway.
Yeah.
Do you want to add anything to that?
I don't know. That's really all I had right there.
Okay. So I agree with you. Excuse me. I did say that even though this is the first time you talk about gameplay, it's still very vague and abstract. So a couple of things. You say, if you read this with me, jump between past and present, objects travel across time, reshaping both worlds. Those are 2 separate sentences, which you read as one sentence, and then it doesn't make sense. It's like there's a grammatical syntax error there. So I think your main heading is you can jump between past and present, right? Great. And then you're describing how, and it's like, well, you use objects to travel across time. It's like, that's cool. But now when I read I guess you'll need to explain the game mechanic to me a little bit, Mandy, because you said your action in the present can rewrite your past, bringing you to different endings. But then when I was trying to get my head around this, and this is the whole like the time, working with time, and there's a couple of movies that try and address this. If I change something in the present, why am I altering the past? Would it not make sense for me to go into the past to alter the future? Do you see what I mean? Because that confused me even more. Because if I change something in the present to change the past, then I'm already changing the present. See, we're doing time paradox and all that good stuff. So yeah, the wording of that confused me. The way I interpret it is that if I travel into the past, I pick up an object, it will change something that happens in the future, which opens up a new timeline. Is that correct?
That's correct. For the past, I don't know how much spoiler that I can give, but by changing the past means that probably changing the perspective of how you see the past.
Okay. It might be a bit too high concept to put into the deck because you can't summarize it in a way that makes sense for the reader, because I immediately jump to the traditional thing of I go into the past, I do something and it changes my present. But
I get that completely, and that makes more sense. But you should clarify it in the deck because, yes, I understand.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So this needs a little bit more work. But what you might want to do is what I said before, where if you define like the 4 main features or mechanics of your game, then you could say Here's an overview of the 4. Now I'm going to go through each one in turn. So here's number 1, time manipulation. Then it's like, at a high level, describe this mechanic. Great. Then if we move on to the next slide, it's like the second mechanic, whatever that might be. Yeah. Okay. Shall I go through this one, Jay?
Yep, go ahead, man.
I really like the way you've described this. Befriend your neighbors by day, at night sneak through their secrets. I like the fact that this is kind of like a prison simulator in a way, where Jay's like,
I thought the same thing. I was thinking Prison Architect, or is it a Prison Architect, the one where you escape or whatever?
yeah.
I thought the very same thing.
I was like, you could really play this up and say that as the player might need to adopt different personas when they talk to different characters in the prison, because you showed me the big guy, right? The aggressive guy. If I need to be super nice to him, maybe my dialogue choices, I have to be like super sweet with him. Otherwise, he'll beat me up. And then if I see a bully, I have to step up my game and be as aggressive as him in order to survive so that he doesn't mug me later. And that for me is like, it's a game of survival. So your conversation system has to be so good that the choices you make will determine if you survive or if you advance and you get the thing that you need to get to the next area. So I would just emphasize that a bit more. The other thing I would say is that, what have I got here? So I've got a couple of more notes. You've not really explained like stealth. Like you said that you spend your afternoons gathering intel and items from your neighbors. When night falls, you solve mechanical and cryptic puzzles to unlock deeper parts of the building. I think that's too high level and doesn't sound really exciting to me. It's almost like, oh, I could do that in any other game. But what is it? What's special about stealth in this game versus stealth in other games? Maybe you could talk about the types of puzzles you have here and say, look, there are like different ways in which you can kind of like you'll be presented with 10 different templates of puzzle types that appear over and over. It's like hacking. Maybe there's file and evidence retrieval. Maybe you've got to build up evidence to use against another inmate so that you can bribe them, blackmail them to get the key to open the door to get to the next area. I think if you just add a bit more in there about, manipulating of the characters, getting evidence to manipulate and interrogate and kind of work your way through the cult, I think that could be quite cool. So yeah, just need to kind of add a bit more detail there. The other thing I was going to say is the bottom image is more interesting than top because obviously it's animated, it's GIF. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if it's exciting because you got stealth and then you got a bit of a mini game. So talk a little bit more about the stealth gameplay. Like, how does that work? What is that mechanic? Do I have to avoid certain lights and torches? Is there something constantly hunting me? Is there someone on guard all night? How does that work?
So the benevolent father chase you. In this mini games specifically, so there is a time limit, and whenever the time limits go up, the benevolent father just walk in the room. So you have to listen to. It's like 12 minutes. You have to listen to the sound effect and also see the lights dim down, and then you have like a really short time limit to sneak behind an object to dodge the governor. This is what it's like in here.
Right. Okay. So then with that said, what I've noticed in the thumbnail is that there's a cursor, which to me says I don't have direct control of the character. I point and click where I want the character to go. I think that's really important. I think that's something you really need to highlight because it can be an issue for console games. Controlling a cursor with your joystick is never fun. But if you have direct control of a character, you are in control. You know exactly when you can do something. So I would just explain how you control stealth and how you play the game as well. It's not obvious, or it isn't immediately obvious.
So I would probably take it one step further. And when we're talking about consolidating all of your genres and figuring out what you want to do, take out the word stealth. There's not enough stealth from what I can see to really call it a stealth game. Like a Metal Gear Solid is a stealth game. Project Zomboid is a stealth game to certain extents. But that's where you're spending the majority of your time in a sneaking stealth-like mode. Whereas here, I mean, yeah, you're hiding from guards and things like that, but it's not like a major part of what you're doing. So you may just want to simplify things and take that part out and just say, don't. I mean, show it. I think this GIF is great, and if you could consolidate what you've got on this page and make that top part of the GIF, so you see it from the day and night side, I think that could work. But this slide is an excellent elevator pitch for the game. It covers exactly what you need, and it goes in and it's very crystal clear on the high level premise of the game. And then with other stuff, you can go into like a little more detail. But I think what you've got here should not be at the 10th slide of the deck. It should be further up at the front.
Yeah. Also, I was going to say that Jay is right that it's not a stealth game. I think what you want to lean into more is the fact that you're talking about retrieving secrets to manipulate, bribe, and infiltrate the cult. I think that's really cool. It's like that is a feature of the game. And there's many ways in which you can do that, which is sneaking, which is a bit of stealth, playing mini games to hack a computer, opening a file cabinet, you're getting the right combination of a lock or something to get the information that you need. That is really cool. And then it leans more into the cult theme. Cool. All right. Next. Oh man, we're on the just over the halfway mark, so we're good for time. Right. Do you want to do this first, Jay?
I mean, it's still a lot of the same, and my note says needless.
Yeah.
I think this is a slide that you can just cut. It's the same GIF as the other one. You don't really say anything in this slide that you don't say in other slides anyway. I would just cut it.
Again, Jay's been reading my notes. I wrote, this could be merged with the previous slide. You can roll in the text into the previous slide. Also, the new GIF here does not really add a lot compared to the previous one. It's just showing being caught. And then you've got a static image on the right, which is just still saying hide. So all of that was conveyed by that one GIF on the previous slide. And these two are not really adding much to it. So yeah, I think you can cut this completely. Maybe... I mean, even the text here, I don't think it adds anything. I'll be honest. I think you lose it completely. Yeah. Okay. So I have some comments on this. Now, I disagree with the statement of having non-action is action. I think you want to rephrase this to say your choice, like you want to emphasize the importance of choice. This is a game about decision making. So what you want to say is you can make a left choice, you can make a right choice, or you can do nothing. This isn't just a game about two choices. There are three choices. So I think that would probably be more interesting. Like, but if it was presented visually, like if you just had like the left door and the right door as two images here, and if you chose the left door, what happens in terms of the story? And if you chose the right door, what happens in terms of story? Because all you've shown me here is I have a choice, but then I don't know what happens if I make the wrong choice or a particular choice. So there is no tension. It's not building up to anything. You've also said like refusing can be defiance, but I'm not seeing what the punishment is for defiance. Like in a cult, if you defy the cult, there are going to be some serious repercussions, right? Do they put you in isolation? Do they, I don't know, take away your food for a week? Do you get punished? Do you lose your luxuries? What happens, right? That is not coming across. So the psychological horror element of your game is not coming across, like the fear of doing something that you shouldn't. So yeah, I would emphasize that. That makes sense. Jay?
My notes just said this could be blended back into slides 9 and 10. Because there's just a lot. This doesn't need its own slide, and what Omar said is exactly right. It's not really telling you anything. It's not really showing you anything. I would merge it. Take those gameplay slides, merge them all into one, instead of having 3 different slides.
Yeah, I mean, what you could do is any slide that you think is definitely gameplay, put that in, and then you could have a slide at the end saying defiance and acceptance of the cult. What happens? So with each of these gameplay, if you get caught, these are the punishments. But if you infiltrate and you succeed, these are the rewards. Get inside information. Get closer to escaping. It's almost like that's how you want to play it. Not enough pitch decks show you like what happens if a player is successful or if they fail. None of developers talk about failure, but I think with this game, failure is the horror. So you really want to talk about that more. Cool. Right. I'm gonna. Jay, do you want me to do this, or do you want to say it?
I think we're on the same page.
All right. So I always notice this about games where music is so important for our game, and I'm like, where's your audio samples? Is there something here I can click on? You've talked about this particular artist. Where is their discography, their albums, their previous works? I don't know what this game sounds like. I mean, I played the trailer at the start. Assume I didn't, or it was muted. I'm on a train and you sent me your pitch deck and I can't hear it. How do I know what this game is going to sound like? So, it's not really part of gameplay. This is just part of building the experience. Now, if the music was tied to a mechanic, that's different. But here, you're just talking about BGM, sound effects. That isn't really part of the gameplay here. So yeah, if this artist is really well known, renowned, you need to show their works, show me what they've done before, put some samples in. I had this thing written down here. I was like, oh, for the different gameplay moments, if you had little screenshots here, 3 or 4, if I click on one, it plays the kind of music I would hear if I was playing the stealth game. If I click the puzzle, this is what the music sounds like. If I'm in conversation with someone, it's a bit more relaxed. So that would give me a palette of samples that gives me a feel of like what the game's going to sound like. Other than that, I don't think if there's much more to add here, you could potentially lose it.
That was what I was going to say.
I knew it was going to say
so we weren't completely on the same page. But I mean, a slide like this, especially if you're dealing with atmosphere, can go one or two ways. You have to remember that you're pitching to publishers who are based all around the world.
Yeah.
You know, they may not be familiar with this artist. You know, they may not be familiar with the awards in Taiwan. So you either need to really show your work on why this artist is super well known, and like Omar said, audio samples, something along those lines, or just take it out. I mean, it's great to have in there as a note somewhere, but it doesn't necessarily, without all of the justification for the reasoning behind it, it doesn't justify its own slide at all.
Yeah, pretty much.
So
you do this, Jay.
You talk about your team, but you don't talk about your team.
Yeah.
So there's nothing that says, you know, who you all are. It says you've got 10 years experience in storytelling design, but you don't have any links or anything to show that. It just really needs to be more in depth. Even if it's just, you know, headshots of the team. Let me just double check and make sure. Yeah. Okay. I wanted to make sure I didn't say all this and then forget that the next slide.
Yeah.
So, all right, good. You either need to go into, I mean, you do need to go into show your principles, you know, and there's only 4 of you, correct?
That's right. And
Yeah.
can I add one question about that? So
Yeah.
it's a little bit tricky is because my team, some of them wants to work anonymously. And for the experience, I try to be a little bit fake because I don't want to expose their identity. So how should I talk to the publishers in this case?
You don't put their names in it or their pictures, but you can say lead programmer has done this game, that sort of stuff, and you just don't. And that's perfectly fine. You don't need names and pictures. Names and pictures help, but it's the names and pictures can also be like the you know, audio designer. If no one knows them anyway, then so you're perfectly fine just putting what their role on the team is and what their experience is, because that's not a don't worry about that part at all. But you need to have some justification in here of what you all have been doing for 10 years.
Yep.
Are those those click these links click through. So that's a good thing. But how, even if it's just logos, if you've done games, put the logos for the games, that sort of stuff.
And what if they don't want to put the games that they work with, just not to identify themselves?
I mean, there's no law that says they have to, but it's just going to make your life a lot easier if you do.
Okay.
Well, I think the reason why Mandy is saying this, there are given the nature of the type of game you're working on and the part of the world that you're in, there is a reason why that is,
Yeah, I get it.
Anonymity is important. So what I will say though is, I guess it's a tricky one, because in my notes, now that you've explained, it makes more sense, and I kind of had a feeling that's why you did this. If it's possible to put the games in, try and get them in, because it's more important to show the games than to highlight this selected exposure.
Yeah.
Because the publisher's not really going to care about some of these events. A lot of these we don't recognize. So we'd have to do a lot of research to figure out, like, oh, they went to this event. Now I have to figure out what kind of game was that event, which might be connected to these guys. Try and make more of a connection if possible. If you can't, not the end of the world. What you can do is you can, like Jay said, put in anonymous, blank heads. I have a sound designer. I have a game designer. Here's me, and then somebody else, and then just talk a little bit about the types of experiences they've worked on without talking about the names of those games, if that makes sense. Just to flesh it out a little bit more. I think that would help. It's okay to leave some of these events in, but I don't think that important. I'll be honest. I think, you guys have got 10 plus years of experience. So I want to know mobile and PC and browser. It's quite impressive. Try and show a little bit more if you can, if possible.
Just remember, you're trying to justify the spend. And so you've got 10 years experience. You don't want that falling by the wayside, when the publisher's like, well, okay, but I don't know what they're doing. If there are things that you can put in here that justify, this is what we've done, this is some of the stuff that we've done, that's going to help you, because it's all about eliminating risk with the publisher. Is it going to get done on time? Do they know what they're doing? All of that sort of stuff. That's what all of this builds to. And so, yeah, I get it. Put in what you can. If people want to be anonymous, that's perfectly fine. I mean, hell, you've got the cult mask that you could use for people's headshots if you wanted to, just slightly differ them or whatever. But you do need more in here that shows your back. I don't see your backstory, but your experience.
Yeah, I like that idea, actually, what Jay just suggested. It's almost like you can lean into the Banksy kind of treatment of it, where it's like you've got the masks representing the team members, and it's like, if you really want to know who we are, please, and you're interested in the game, then get in touch. That kind of puts the ball is in the publisher's court at that point. It's like, okay, we're interested, and I think we can figure out why we need to approach them to get more information. Cool. Right. This one's an easy one for me. I don't think you need this slide, but I like the content. I almost feel like this could just be a sign-off tagline on your contact page, just to say, this is the kind of studio that we are. That's it. Even then, I don't know. I still feel like you probably don't need it. I mean, I do like the fact that you make statements really to the point. Uncanny, immersive narrative games resonating with Asian diaspora, right? Fantastic. But I don't think it needs a full slide. Just put it as a... Yeah,
you could put it in the sign-off. You could even put it as part of our team slide down at the bottom if you wanted to. But yeah, I'm with Omar. It doesn't need a full slide.
No. Right, this is where things get a little more interesting for me. So Jay's going to probably talk about data and metrics and numbers and things. I think first thing I'll say, both Jay and I will say, is that if you've got data, you need to show your sources. Where did you get these numbers from? So a little hyperlink, where did you get the sales numbers? Where did you get the gross revenue, etc., Steam Analytics, etc. The next thing I was going to say is that genre is a tricky one because we've talked about your game quite a bit now. So it's a psychological mystery adventure game to some extent, right? It's not a visual novel, but it has some visual novel elements in it. But it's a mix of those things, right? Now, all of these games, I recognize two here. So I recognize Beacon Pines. I remember looking at that before it even got signed. 12 Minutes is on Netflix now as well, I think. It's part of the games you can download. Could be wrong. Those are quite recognized by Western audiences. Then the other three, I think, might be specific to your part of the world, possibly. Try and pick more mainstream comparable games, but also pick games which would share the label that your game has. So if your game is a psychological horror, 12 Minutes and Beacon Pines are. Beacon Pines is really cool. It's kind of like it is a bit Stranger Things like, which is great. But I think you need to just kind of call out what these games are individually. And there was an old game that I'm playing on DS now. It's 999, 9 hours, 9 days, 9 personas. I keep forgetting what that stands for, and it is like 9 people put in a situation. They don't know who they are. Like they don't know each other's identities. They need to escape, and you have to solve puzzles to get out of this room. It's like a Saw movie scenario, or else they're going to be killed off one by one. So you need to find games like that. Try and find more modern comparisons as well. I mean, so, to be fair, I think you've got 2021, 2022, 2024. 2021's pushing it. Try and find something in the last couple of years, if possible. 2017, 2018, too old. Way too old. 21's borderline, because after 2 years, it's like it's kind of done. And everything after that,
2022 is borderline.
that is true. Yeah, I keep forgetting we're not in 2024, we're in 2025
Yes.
now. Damn it.
And I always say it, and I'll say it again. If it's older than 2 years old, it should be written on papyrus, because that's what it's worth. It's like the industry moves way too fast. So you need, in addition to what Omar said about making sure that you got things that are in your label, but you also need more, modern analogies. So anything within the last 2 years. But you also have to think, you don't want to put everything in there that's like multi-million-dollar. You need to show a span. This is the goal. The goal we're hitting for is, detention and $5 million, but not that one, because it's like 9 years old, 8 or 9 years old. But this is the high, this is the medium, and this is the low.
Yeah.
But you also need to say why they're comparable.
Yeah.
Because we see these slides on two different ways. People either use, people will use comparison slides to talk about gameplay. It's like it's comparable to these games because we pull puzzles from this game and psychological horror from this game, or it's comparable on sales and all that sort of stuff. And so you need to explain which one of those they are. Use more current ones. Use a bigger spread.
Yeah, it's very. I would say it's rare, but a lot of developers, when they make these slides, it's like what Jay says. It's either one or the others, and very few will actually be like it compares in terms of sales, and it's comparable to these in terms of gameplay and theme. And you can be fortunate if you're making a game that is a bit more recognizable in terms of mechanics and what you're doing, but yours is a little bit of an oddball. And in my head, I'm thinking, oh, what does it compare to? There's like Doki Doki Literature Club. That was like creepy horror kind of dating sim game, but that's 2017. So it's like, what is the modern version of that now in the last year or two? And there's plenty of games on Steam, but unfortunately, a lot of them are obscure, and some of the ones that sell really well, we still don't know what they are because they just haven't broken through into like the main charts, but they probably sell well. So yeah, like Jay says, pick relevant games, highlight how and why they compare, and then something that we've talked about more now is like, where do you think your game's going to sit in terms of sales? Try and be confident and humble, but don't be too confident. Hey, we're going to hit 3 million. Like, no. Your expectations. Yeah.
Don't tell me you're going to get Silent Hill numbers, because that's another horror game. It's like that's not. But I mean, the thing I like is that you didn't pick AAA titles. That part you did well on. You want to go for that same indie feel and all that sort of stuff, but more recent, clarify why, and get you a wider spread of stuff in there.
Yeah. So this is an odd slide because you've done two things here. The information on the right is interesting because that's kind of what you've done to date in terms of marketing, in terms of engagement with the community. You've started to build a community. But then on the left-hand side, you're talking about target audience, which I felt like some of this content could have lived on the previous slide. Like if you've got those comparable games, then underneath you would say, these games, here's the ones that are narrative, here's the ones that are mystery, psychological horror, dystopia. You don't need to put it here. It just confuses this slide. So I would lose that information. Now, what I have said, though, about the information on the right-hand side is, okay, firstly, I had to go on your Steam page, and the first thing I do whenever I see any games that are creepy, I scroll to the bottom of the description to see what you've put in the disclaimer. And in your game, you say that you have some mature content, mature themes. You talk about suicide, you talk about some other things. And I'm like, age rating. What is the age rating of your game? Very important. that could have been on that summary slide at the start, but it needs to be mentioned much sooner before you get here. So that. Then there's a couple of other things I've got. The wish list numbers, interesting. Followers on Instagram, interesting. Less than 100 users on Discord, I wouldn't show that. It's not high enough. It's too low. It's interesting how you've bundled together Blue Sky and Twitter. I think you need to separate them. And if one of them has incredibly high numbers, probably lean on that. I know why developers are starting to do that now, and it's understandable. But yeah, split that up. But something that, I mean, this is me. I had to do my own investigation, right? You have a Kickstarter, or you had a Kickstarter for this game. And you guys raised $10,000 more than what you needed. You got featured by Kickstarter, like selected by their staff, 170% goal reach, right? You need to shout about that. That should be, like, if you have these socials on the top, screenshot of your Kickstarter page. Like I put it in our chat. Jay, I don't know if you've seen it. If you click on it,
I've got it pulled up.
Yeah. That is impressive, right? You guys didn't even get through to the bottom of your like full wish list. You got a lot of cash there. So talk about that. However, the counter to that now is after doing that investigation, some red flags appeared, which is that was from 2022, right? Now I have some questions for you, and I'm sidetracking a little bit. What happened after that Kickstarter? Because nothing happened. That Kickstarter was supposed to fund this game, right? Okay. Are you able to disclose what happened, or do you want to? Okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So basically, we finished the first demo, and because of the COVID hit, we all had to. And also, like I'm an immigrant, so as my partner, so we have to figure out ways to stay in here. So we had to do a sidetrack on just earning our living other than creating the game.
Right. Okay.
Fair enough.
That's fair enough. And to be honest, if you feel comfortable just saying COVID period, hey, like everyone, that's totally understandable. I mean, we would assume as much, but I think if you just want to highlight that period, it kind of takes away the risk. And then you won't have the uncomfortable conversation with the publisher to talk about that. If it's already flagged beforehand, it's like, project was put in the freezer because of COVID and relocation and starting up again. It's like, great. Okay, fine. I understand. Now, the other thing I was going to ask is, there was money raised for that game, which would have funded the whole game or only just the demo? I'm kind of unsure what the Kickstarter was.
Okay, so that's actually something that I also want to address. So even though you see that we have like 10 years experience, as in video game, like commercial video game, we were pretty amateur. So we definitely had like different expectation than what we have right now. So that one, we definitely had like much higher expectation that we thought, oh, maybe like that money could actually back up everything, which definitely not the case right now. So ends up it was just like only like sufficient for us to build the team and then create a demo and then live hits. So here's now.
I think you can spin that. You could say,
yeah, you can totally spin that.
Yeah, you could say like, look, we started, we realized that this was a big undertaking, and also the community was so engaged. We realized we need to make a bigger experience than what we wanted to start off with, and for that we were like, let's treat this seriously. But then COVID happened, and now we're in the situation where we want to make the game that we really want to make to really please our fans, and this is why we need more, and that's it, and that's totally understandable, and that sounds like the truth, right? So I would run with that, and like Jay says, you can spin that.
Yeah. I wouldn't go into detail on it in the deck, but just have that ready because people are going to ask. But there's not a publisher worth working with out there that is not going to understand, okay, we bit off more than we can chew, and we realized that we needed to do more. So my only thoughts were basically the same. I would take out all of your follower accounts that are under 1,000 because it's not really, I mean, honestly, I would take out everything except your wish list because it's not really adding that much value. And then, put the little blurbs in there about how you got featured on Kickstarter. I've got it pulled up, but I can't share it over right now. But even if you just use that key art that says 170% funded Kickstarter staff pick,
That's powerful.
that's a feather in your cap that you should absolutely use.
Yeah.
All right, we're coming close on time. All right, so
Oh,
we
yeah,
only got a couple more.
Only a couple.
Questions. First, does 180K cover Switch 1 and 2 porting, or is it 180K? So you need to be clear about that, because otherwise it's just like, I don't know what I'm spending money on. For 200K, am I getting all of this? Same as earlier, bump up your sale price to 15. This and the next slide together with me. The big question I have, if there's only 4 of you and it's a 4-hour game and you're talking about not launching until 2026, are you all working on this? If you get funded, are you working on this full time?
Yes.
Okay. Clarify that, because it almost doesn't look like you are.
Yeah.
Because it's a long time for a small studio to put together a small-ish game.
Yeah. But with that said, because Switch is not part of the package now, 180,000 for just the Steam version of the game does sound a little bit pricey. So yeah. But then I'm factoring in how much you guys are going to get paid over the course of 12 months each. And it kind of makes sense in terms of salary, but it's just something you got to be aware of. Like you need to have the specifics there. Publisher will say, show me the breakdown of your costs, right? How much is it actually going to cost to make this game? A couple of comments from me. So you put labor 155, but then sound and voiceover is separate. That's still labor. So it's like, yeah, it's like people making the game, but then sound and voice, that is also people making the game. Administration, you need to say what that is. I don't know what that could be. I don't know. Are you rolling that into like premises rent, but you're all remote? So I guess it's a bit confusing. Just need to be really clear about what this all adds up to. Software, that's fine. You guys are probably using very specific software for the 2D animations. That's fine. But if you can break that down a little bit more, just to show like this is how much the artist is going to get paid, how much the program is going to get paid, how much I'm going to get paid, always helps. And usually we see that as pie charts. But yeah.
So here's the other. Can I highlight? I can.
Yes.
That's going to throw up a lot of red flags.
Whoa.
All of a sudden, the budget also has to include Kickstarter awards and rewards that you promised people 4 years ago. That you really need to address front on how much that's going to be, because if I'm the publisher, I don't want to pay for that.
Okay.
That was cost that you undertook. That's not my responsibility. So you need to either pull that out or address why it needs to be in there. But Kickstarter rewards are a known tripping point for a lot of developers. They can go into it thinking it's a wonderful idea, and then they price it out, and then they realize they're making negative money on their project because they're spending it all on rewards. So you need to, I would advise you remove it and state to the publisher that you're going to be taking care of that yourself. But
that's great.
Not,
yeah.
it's going to be a big red flag.
Yeah, because we actually saved money for that. I was just going to clarify it because like I'm afraid like people might ask, but if we're actually saving the money and we're taking care of that ourselves, then maybe I shouldn't just keep it. I shouldn't keep it here.
I mean, you could say that we are actually going to fulfill tier promises from Kickstarter, and the publisher doesn't have to worry about it.
Yeah,
that's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that's not what it says right now.
Yeah. It sounds like this is on the publisher.
Yes.
Cool. Okay. We've kind of already talked about this. I like the way you've got your timeline set. I think if you could just highlight like, hey, project was frozen from this period because of high level points, just say, COVID, and that's it. That just covers that 2-year gap from August 2022 to 2024. The other thing I was going to ask though, you say there's a new demo to be complete in May of this year, but then you already have 170% crowdfunded for the demo previous, which in theory should be the first chapter of the game, right?
It was, but then we actually extended our story, so it ends up it wasn't. So for the May version, it will become like the actual first chapter. And the reason why we're creating it because we have some kind of opportunity coming up probably, and we might actually going to have a chance to show it out there. So we want to create that.
Okay. Right. Yeah. It's just there might be some red flags there as well, but you just need to be very clear. Like you've said on the bottom left, Kickstarter funding was sufficient to establish the studio and develop the first chapter. But when I read that Kickstarter, to me it said you promised the game. So that's why it's like, oh, okay, you need to just say scope changed. You know,
Okay.
we're making a bigger, more ambitious game. This is why. Okay. Jade. Oh, and another thing, sorry. There is a big thing I noticed on here. June 2026. Early access. Why do you need early access for a linear adventure puzzle game? Yeah, Jay's like, oh no. You do not need early access.
Okay.
I would take that out, but also say, because this is getting to be Next Fest is getting to be a very big issue with developers, and we actually talked about this in the podcast last week. Instead of saying that's when you're going to do your Next Fest, just clarify under the marketing slide that you talked about that you have not used your Next Fest slot, because we're seeing a lot of developers get in trouble. They're trying to build wish lists, they're trying to build momentum for their game. So before they have a publisher, they go and they use their Next Fest slot. You only get one per game. So then the publisher doesn't have that marketing lever to pull. And that's a very, very big marketing lever to pull. So I can't imagine why you would actually need a early access. And there's, especially for a month, I would take out that and then just flip the July up to that spot and say that's where you're going to be full release, and then clarify that you have not used your Next Fest slot yet.
Yeah, but also early access doesn't really make sense for these types of games, in my opinion. Early access suits games from more kind of like live service, like, you know, if it's like, hey, we're making an online shooter, or we're making a game like Lethal Company, and we're using early access to stress test the game and add some new features. That makes sense. But with a game that's got a beginning, middle, and end, it's kind of like you've seen it. Why would you go back to it? And what are you changing and tweaking before final release? And also, people would spoil it before it even, you know, it's like, oh, there's that.
You're better off just releasing a demo.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I forget what the meta is now. Is it a demo on a separate Steam page that leads to the whatever?
Oh, yeah.
I check with Chris Zukowski on that part, but you know, you don't need early access, and clarify that you have not used your Next Fest slot.
Yeah. Okay. So one thing we didn't mention, I mentioned right at the start before we even get to this one, the ordering of some of your slides. Now, the way I like to see it is we addressed it at the start. You have your kind of your overview, talk about the story, talk about features, USPs, gameplay mechanics. Then you start to talk about the market. But then what happens is you start to mix the order of like, here's our ask, here's how much we need. And then you talk about, oh, here's the roadmap. And then you kind of go back again with socials and marketing. So it's a little bit all over the place. I think what you want to do is leave the ask and your team slides towards the end. Everything up until that point is about the game. And then it's like, you love what you see here, right? Here's the bill. So it's like, this is what we need. We've shown you the roadmap. This is exactly what we need. Then after that, you say, right, love what you see. You happy? Well, here's the talent that's going to deliver that. And then you talk about the team. And then it's like, great. Now you've kind of bolstered the whole pitch. And then at the end, you just say, great, you love it. Let's get in touch. And that's what this slide would be. So you just need to reorder some of those slides. But yeah, talking about this particular slide, I really like the art on the right. It's kind of like the head's turned. It's like, you better buy this game. You better invest. It's like it's really nice. I like the art. I would say is that, Mandy, you need to highlight your role.
Okay.
You're the creative director. You're the CEO. Whatever your role is, I need to know what that title is. So whoever I'm talking to, is that someone who is in charge of the vision, or is that someone who reports to someone who's in charge of the vision? The other thing I was also going to say is, you mentioned your Discord, Instagram, Steam, etc. Whatever you decide to keep from those, you need to put them here under the Steam pages icon. So if I click them, it's a call to action. It's like, boom, I go straight to your Twitter. Boom, I go straight to Blue Sky. I can go to Steam. I can go on the Kickstarter. It's all here. And then the other thing I was going to say is try and keep a consistent format. Name of the will is on the bottom left now. And this is my OCD kicking in.
I didn't even notice that. Yes.
try and keep. There's a couple of instances. If we're just over the limit now. But Jay, if you go back a few slides, Mandy's team did a great job of keeping these subheadings on the left: marketing, comparable games. Keep going, gameplay. Then gameplay on the right. It's like what? And it was just like, it threw me off. I was like, you're so consistent. And then you did a few slides where I was like, what? So yeah, try and keep it just like very nicely presented, very clean. But then in a few places, it's a little bit, ugh. But other than that, don't really have much more to add, Jay.
I mean, yeah, I agree with Omar. Clarify who you are. Especially if we're pulling the social media links out of earlier where you only have a couple hundred followers, just put them right here. Don't put the follower count, just put the logos, make it linked. They'll figure out you don't have that many followers, but you're not really calling it out. But no, that's all I got too.
Yeah. And also I want to say this is a really good pitch. Like it as a concept, I think there are a lot of things you've done really well. I just think you just need to work on some of those orderings, like be a bit more picky about the type of information you want to include in your deck, like we've advised. But I think it's an interesting concept for sure. Like I downloaded the demo. I just didn't have time to play it before this review.
Oh, I'll give you the Steam key for our new demo.
Okay. All right. So that's the other thing on here. It says Steam page, new demo Steam key available per request. So now there's two demos. There's an old one from 2022 on the Steam page.
Right.
And then there's a new one that you guys are working on. I guess the question is, would you be able
to take the first one down?
Yeah. Replace that. Give
Immediately.
the publisher the latest. Yeah.
Even if it's not done yet.
Is it better than your 2022 demo? And is it
definitely yes?
Okay,
then take it down.
Take it down. Okay. It doesn't matter if it's not finished.
Realistically, you're not going to be signing a publisher until that demo's finished anyway. So there's no point in having them misjudge the quality of your game by downloading a 3-year-old demo. I would take it down when we get off this call.
Mm-hmm.
I've had that a few times where developers have sent me a demo link to their game and I play it and I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, this isn't up to par. It's like, oh, by the way, that's a 3-year-old demo. I'm like, wait,
why
what?
is it there?
Like, and then I'm like, why have you sent me that then? It's like, oh, we have a new one, but we weren't sure about sending it to you because it's not perfect. I'm like, why? What, has your vision changed? Yeah, the vision's completely changed. So show the latest version of your game.
Mandy, thank you so much. We say it every
Thank
time,
you.
but it takes an immense amount of courage to put your pitch deck out here on YouTube for God and everybody to see, and especially to have us two come through and criticize it and pull it apart, on live internet.
No, it was great. Thank you so much for the F5s. I really need that.
Awesome. Well, that's it for us. If you would like to be on a future YouTube breakdown, go to our Discord. You can sign up for the free pitch deck reviews that happen every 2 weeks there. You can sign up for these, or if you want a much more customized and detailed experience, well, we have that as well. The details are on the Discord and on indiegamebusiness.com. That's it. Thanks, everybody.
Cool. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.